Today we have the privilege of speaking with Manuel Bauer, the photographer of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who has had the rare opportunity to capture the timeless moments of wisdom, compassion, and history through his lens. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Can you briefly introduce yourself to our viewers and what drives your work behind the lens?
My name is Manuel Bauer. I studied photography in the 80s, 40 years ago, and I became a documentary photographer, what we call the concerned photojournalist. So I try to use my camera also as a social tool and to somehow bring awareness about political or social issues or injustice or environmental issues. So I see my photography somehow as a contribution.
What drives your work behind the lens?
Yeah, my motivation is somehow to make the world a better place. And photography for me is a very helpful tool. So it's not that I don't do it for photography, but photography is a very good tool to bring awareness, and it's an easy way to understand the subject for the viewer. It doesn't need language. It doesn't need translation. Everybody understand what a smile in a face is or a sad face. So it's a very international language, and it's a very intuitive and emotional way of communication. So that makes it very powerful, and photography can have a very big impact on decisions that should be made, or about how people think about our world and the situations we are living in. So my motivation is basically a political motivation. It's whenever possible compassion based, and that's why Tibet became one of my very big, or maybe the biggest subject in my photography.
You have spent over 3 decades photographing His Holiness the Dalai Lama, from public events to deeply personal moments. How did it all begin, and what's the story behind these remarkable images?
Well, it started 1990 when I was a very young photojournalist coming to India to portray the Tibetans living in exile. The question was, can Tibetan culture that is destroyed by the Chinese in Tibet, can it survive in exile after the first generation passes away? Can this knowledge and culture be given to the next generation born in exile? That was our question. And so we traveled all over India, different settlements, and interviewed people. And sure, we had to meet His Holiness the Dalai Lama, since His Holiness is the leader of the Tibetan people. And so I was allowed to photograph His Holiness also in his private rooms. And back then I thought this is just normal. Now I'm a photojournalist. It's natural that we walk in and out, that famous people. And I didn't really realize back then what a privilege it was to meet His Holiness. And then His Holiness came to open our exhibition at the University of Zurich. So we had an exhibition called Tibetan Culture on Foreign Soil, which was that research we did in India. And His Holiness happened to be in Zurich, and he's supposed to open our exhibition. But then the whole, his speech had to be cut off because there was a bomb threat against His Holiness. So the whole university had to be evacuated. And the very interesting thing was that the public was not nervous at all. They were just very sad not to be allowed to listen His Holiness speech. And the other stunning thing was that His Holiness, who supposedly was threatened by a bomb, threatened by life, he stayed very calm and very relaxed, and even in very good moods. We had a lot of fun together, even though there was a bomb ticking. And so maybe that was the starting point for me to realize that who is this person who can stay so calm and who can control his emotions so well, even in a life-threatening situation. And I think that maybe was the sparkle to say somebody has to research visually who this man is. I mean, there's a lot of books, there is a lot of text, but visually there was nothing comprehensive going deep. Also, 10 years later, there was a lot of pictures, His Holiness on the stage, the monk from Tibet always smiling, all these stereotypes, which are also true. But my idea was then to visually research who His Holiness really is, much deeper than the person on stage. Not for me, maybe not for now, but mainly for future generations, for researchers, for the Tibetans as a people to somehow keep some memories of this extraordinary person, but also for research. And I believe in imagery. I believe in the icon. For me, as a young like pacifist person, non-violent person, it was good to have an image of Mahatma Gandhi, to know how Mahatma Gandhi looked like. This gave me some power, somebody to a role model, somebody to look up, somebody as a teacher. Just to have an image is helpful and gives strength. So my wish was to build a body of visual work that represents the Dalai Lama.
And you have had rare access to His Holiness the Dalai Lama's life, both simple and profound. So how did that change you? And is there any moments that still stick with you?
Yeah, it's always difficult to pick certain moments because, as you know, His Holiness is great 24 hours every day. So it's just beautiful to observe how he lives compassion. So as a photographer, it's partly is intellectual. I have to do my research. I have to know the subject. I have uh, to know what I want to tell people. So this is more an intellectual part. Also the logistics, the organization, to know the camera, to be at the right place at the right moment, all these things. That's more brain, like the more rational brain. But while I work in the moment, it's very emotional, very intuitive. Partly, sure, my brain is observing and being ready and thinks in technical terms, but the bigger part of my brain is just intuition, is emotion, is being very transparent and giving all my senses a lot of power. Also, smell, feeling, what is going on, what atmosphere is in this room. So it's not a very intellectual. For instance, I cannot really listen while I take pictures. I only listen to things that are important. When the subject changes, I understand the subject changes, but I also realize somebody's coming in, so the atmosphere changes. So it's not a very it's a very intimate thing to in that state of mind to observe somebody. You start to understand a person very, very deeply, not via logic, not only via logic or knowledge, but in a very intimate, personal way. So, for instance, I know exactly what His Holiness hand will do next, because I have to be ready for that move. And so you observe somebody on a very personal way. And this is the big beauty about His Holiness, because he lives compassion every second. And to see compassion lived and transported in everyday life and realized in all with all people he would meet. This is just absolutely beautiful, because, and that's also why His Holiness is so authentic, I believe, because all he thinks, all he says, all his action is always compassion based. He can in seconds uh, check his emotions. Is my motivation compassion based, or is it somewhere egoistic, or do I have another agenda? That's why he's so authentic, because it's always compassion based, because he trained his whole life to be ready and a master in checking on his emotions, what the motivation of his emotions are, and correct them. And that makes it so beautiful to be with him and observe him, and to realize, woof, there is a perfect being that managed to have compassion even in his dreams. If you would ask him, are you perfect? He never would agree on that. But he would point out maybe 1 minute 3 years ago where he thinks that he did not react perfectly. So this 1 minute 3 years ago shows that all the other 3 years, every minute of these 3 years, he was kind of doing quite well. So
Yeah.
come on, it's perfect.
And recently, your new book, The Dalai Lama Photographs by Manuel Bauer, came out in July 2025. So it has 384 pages spanning 1990 to 2024. What can readers expect to find inside?
Well, I hope they can experience His Holiness. I hope one can understand His Holiness on another level than, the intellectual written document or biography or books, but on a very private, personal relationship level, to feel uh, also not only what His Holiness does every day and how extremely disciplined and hardworking he is, but also to see, I believe photography can see inside things. I mean, technically, photography can only record light that is reflected from the object. That's the technical, what the machine that's going on, the physical action. But I believe there is something mystical about photography, that because we know these objects, we know what a person actually is, we can see inside an image, which is just a two-dimensional flat thing. I hope that I sometimes manage with my photography that people can look beyond the paper, but inside His Holiness, and realizing what is going on inside. For instance, during meditation or when he meets people, what's going on in this meeting? What's the non-verbal connection between the two people? What's going on now? And I hope that in that book you can partly maybe experience this. So to be in touch with His Holiness on a very uh, more emotional level. And then we worked hard to have quite extended caption. And these captions you don't find with the images. You might criticize that, but I believe the problem is people read. When the eye sees text, the eye is very attracted to text. So that the people will always read first, but photography can explain much more or other things than words. So that's why we separate the text so much from the images. And so if you are interested what the facts are about a picture, then you can read these very extensive captions written by Christian Schmidt, which explain much that a picture cannot show. Many things a picture cannot show that only text can show. So we have these beautiful short texts by Chimpala, very beautiful, very easy read, and giving a rhythm in the book, and not straightly connect to the picture before and after that text, but that's more a very beautiful read. And then you have the images, and then you have the extended captions.
Over 3 decades, how did you balance your time with His Holiness the Dalai Lama? I even saw the photos you had taken in planes too. And what's been your most unforgettable moments with him?
The balancing of the time that I spent with His Holiness mainly was a financial question. So whenever I had the money, I tried to photograph His Holiness. It's not like I was paid as an official photographer by someone. I had to find the money from supporters that would believe in the project, or then I would do commercial work to earn money to invest in travels with His Holiness. So that how the time more or less was decided by the dictatorship of money. So not only, oh, I would like to, it's also a question of financial means. Yeah, and yeah, that's basically the main reason.
And what's been your most unforgettable moments
Well,
throughout this?
it's always difficult because every minute with His Holiness is beautiful. So it's always difficult to distinguish between moments, and that's the beauty about His Holiness. That every minute in a day is great with His Holiness, and that's the impressive thing about His Holiness, because every minute is compassion based, and that makes him also so authentic, because His Holiness trained his whole life to observe his emotions and check if his own emotions are motivated by compassion, and if not, then immediately correct these emotions. So that's why he every minute is His Holiness is so true and so authentic. So actually every minute with him is beautiful, because every minute has the same binding center, which is compassion, this very logical center of humankind, compassion. And so every minute is beautiful.
You must have thousands of photos with deep emotional and historical value. As a photographer, which one means the most to you and why?
His Holiness is his personality or his qualities are so huge and diverse. It's a universe. So it's actually not correct to pick one image representing him, because I think it's impossible to have one image that shows all these qualities. I mean, if somebody is a boring person, then you can make one image that is representing this person. Or if somebody is a only violent person, it's possible to have that one image. But with His Holiness, it's not possible, I believe. Even the best photographer will not manage. But you can certainly say that some images are important to represent him, or also would show the most important part maybe of him. And I think it's the cover of the book, which the editor chose, not myself, but it looks like this image combines a lot of His Holiness. So because it's inside, by the eyes being closed, it's inside, but it's also, the gesture is actually looking into the future. It's looking outside. And then there is this very comfortable smile in his Holiness face, like being very much at ease with himself. So I think these are three important qualities. But then maybe even more important is maybe the last images were extremely simple images. For me as a photographer, difficult to take in the beginning because I want to do very good and crazy and images that have a lot of action or many things inside. But these last images are the most simple way of showing a person, which is just a portrait of the head, nothing in between, no action, nothing in the background. But because His Holiness is in such deep meditation, looking inside, working on his mind, and I believe you feel this in these very simple images because nothing else is distracting. I believe in these last images, these very simple images where actually the photographer nearly doesn't exist, maybe. I think you can see inside His Holiness partly. So maybe these are the most important images.
These photos mean everything to Tibetans and His Holiness the Dalai Lama's followers worldwide. How do you plan to preserve or share this collection in the future?
Well, that's a big question. I think hopefully this new book and also my old book somehow contribute. Then I try to do my very best that a lot of it is negative on film. Everything beyond 2008 or before 2008 was all shot on reel, and so I do everything to safeguard these documents. I mean, luckily we have quite a lot of knowledge today how you can preserve a negative on film over maybe 150, maybe 200 years, and so my archive will go to the most important, most serious institution capable of guarding these negatives. They have, for instance, the room for color negatives is 2 degrees higher than the room for black and white negatives, just to show you the scale of quality. So they will preserve the negatives, and this archive is publicly accessible for how to say, for scientists or researchers or whatever. And the other thing is that the private office, Tenzin Jejola and Don, they have, whenever they want images, I provide, and a lot of images they have already, and also you can see some images of mine on His Holiness official website. So sure, I give everything to the Tibetan community. Sure, there is some copyright issues sometimes also because I want to control, not for my benefit or my name or for money, but how the images of His Holiness are used. So if I just spread everything, there is danger that there is misuse by evil powers to play around with these images or to disgrace His Holiness. So, but for instance, to Tibetan institutions, to the CTA, to private office, whenever you need images, you just ask me. And for instance, just as a symbol, commercially, it was a little bit headache because my agency, they had to ask a newspaper first for the text or the context that the images use. Then they had to ask for permission from me. And then they had to sign the paper, signed kind of a contract. So my images were very uncomfortable to use. So it was not very often published, which is sad because people should actually see them. On the other hand, the danger that they are misused, I didn't want that to happen. So I was commercially not very interested for the agency. And but it's always a balance. You want to share it because it means something, hopefully, for people. But also, I want to not have His Holiness disgraced or misused politically, or so that's a little bit of a tricky thing. Yeah. The book is available all over the world. The images are there. The book is now, there is 9 editions already. So we have Chinese, we have Vietnamese, we have Mongolian, Russian, Italian soon, French, German, English, even an Indian edition. I mean, thanks to the private office or the Garden Prodang Foundation who helped with their network. But you can have it in Chinese. So it's available. The work, the images are available.
I noticed that you often focus on His Holiness the Dalai Lama's hands in your photos. What do you to photograph his hands?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And maybe part of it is that you can show activity through the hands. Like in a theatrical play, a traditional Indian theatrical play, where is the action? The action is where the eyes go to God, for instance, or where the hands go. That's where the action is, the flute. So through the hands you can explain activity, and especially that a lot of activity, since His Holiness is a monk, is happening inside. So, and it's very difficult. Sure, he is not only the meditator. He says we have to implement this in daily life, into action. Don't just sit in a monastery and pray. Go out, help society. And he does it. Sure, that's good situations to explain His Holiness. But on the other hand, a lot of processes that he's working on, very disciplined, are inside. So the hands can help to explain that. For instance, to show compassion is quite difficult. Sure, His Holiness blesses somebody. That's an image of compassion. But then how other to show compassion? His Holiness in prayer, sometimes you can see he doesn't just pray, or it's not meditation to work about himself, but it's prayers for all sentient beings. And you can, in his gesture, you can feel this. So the hands are there very important. And also the gesture of giving, explains His Holiness. So the problem sometimes with His Holiness is, let's say he loves nature, but he's so disciplined. For instance, we went to the castle of Lani in Czech Republic. It's a huge castle, and it's the seat of the president. So His Holiness by Václav Havel always was allowed to stay in that castle. And I was hoping, wow, such a beautiful park, and it's secure. There is security around. Now His Holiness will go and walk through the flowers, and he can take a picture how he loves nature. No, His Holiness he arrives there, he shuts down the windows, and in big discipline, he starts to work on himself, to read the texts or to meditate. So how can I show these things, and with other people, with their hobbies and, their distraction, they go and play, or you can explain them via action. But His Holiness, if he has time, he meditates. So the hands help to not just have him sit always in meditation, but so hands are often an important image in photography. If I have to explain a craftsman, what is he doing with a hand? But and His Holiness does a lot of things with his hand, doing rituals, doing prayers.
Finally, beyond this, His Holiness the Dalai Lama's photos, you have published other photography works. Can you tell us about those?
Yeah, I think one of my most important work might be Escape from Tibet. And sadly, it doesn't exist in an English book yet. It's only a German book, and I should take it out and try again to find a publisher maybe one day. And but we didn't manage back then. Don't know. So this was in '95 when I accompanied a father with his 6-year-old daughter from Lhasa to Dharamsala via Nang Pala. Although we knew the shooting, we knew the dangers, the snowstorm, the crevasses, the Nepali giving refugees back, exchange for money, all this. So it's actually still, I believe, the only true document of escape from Tibet via Nang Pala, definitely. And so I think that's maybe my most important work that I did.
Is there any special moments that still holds you regarding the photography journey you have taken throughout 1990 to 2025?
Yeah, I mean there is so many, but what we maybe not touched yet is for instance humor. You know, his Holiness his humor is so beautiful. You know, it's so many situations, but I remember one, for instance, which somehow explains, I believe, His Holiness quite well. There was a press conference in Paris, and there was really many journalists. And next to His Holiness was his translator into French, Mathieu Ricard, seating, also a very realized meditator and monk, but a French person, but really, I think, a true Buddhist. And so one journalist asked about the political situation in Tibet, and it was really tough, you know, all this information, and it was very serious. The whole situation, the whole feeling in the whole, you know, everybody was touched by what His Holiness was giving information about the political situation and the suffering in Tibet. So it took a while, and Mathieu Ricard, the translator, took a water bottle to pour some water into His Holiness' glass, but the cover, the cap was still on the bottle, and it fell into the glass, and the water spilled all over His Holiness, you know, like there was all these black water dots. But His Holiness was so focused that he just, without any glimpse of the eye, continued on the subject. So when he was over, Mathieu had to translate into French language. So His Holiness relaxed, and Mathieu started to explain all this sad information about Tibet. Very focused, very concentrated, very serious. So His Holiness took the cup of the bottle out of his water glass and threw it into Mathieu's glass, and it spilled all over him. So, and Mathieu continued, like His Holiness before, completely focused on the political things. But I thought this is so typical for His Holiness, that it can be really tough things, be it Kala Chakra initiation, be it political, and he can be full concentrated, but still part of him, he has so much capacity that he still has the capacity, I hope, to also have the positive sides of life with him and humor. And it didn't affect at all, you know, the seriousness of the subject, but it helped everybody to digest and to remember that and to realize, and maybe also not to be depressed by the information, but to go into action. And yeah, that's, for instance, a typical situation of his humor, and also of all this discipline and seriosity, but also of his capability to be positive and have not losing humor. And yeah. for instance.
Do you have any future plans to continue the photography works with His Holiness the Dalai Lama?
Yeah, sure. I hope, but it's a new chapter in the biography of His Holiness. It's a new chapter in Tibetan history, and His Holiness activities change completely. So I also have to adjust how to do this decent um, and to find somehow ways of now including this new time into this visual document. I will see, and I hope there will be chances for me, and that I will have permission and access to continue my work.
Yeah, and when do you plan to join to continue the
I don't know. Right now, I don't have any date or concrete plan, but let's see what pops up. And if I have the financial means and to continue. Yeah, let's see.
Thank you. I sincerely appreciate your valuable time in joining our interview, and thank you so much for your time.